we have to be asking ourselves the question, what would a world look like where the United States is not the largest superpower? We have to be asking ourselves. If you're not asking yourself that question, you're just staring at a wall. You're blinding yourself. Mm-hmm. We have to be asking ourselves a question. What do we do as a country, and what do you do as an individual if America is not at the top of the mountain anymore? Economists are predicting that by 2033, China will be the largest superpower in the world.
Do
The
you agree with
largest
that?
military and the largest economy.
Do you agree with that?
If you're looking at empirical evidence, absolutely.
So
If
do I.
nothing changes between now and 2033, they might even get there faster. So we have to accept the fact that the world is changing. Now, there's still a long time. That's 10 years. That's a decade between now and 2033. Mm-hmm. Can we effect changes now that prevent that from happening? I think we can. They'd have to be pretty radical changes, but I think we can do it. But if we just turn a blind eye and we say it's never going to happen, if we just ignore it, if we put our faith in politicians to do it for us, I'm not so sure it's going to happen in that case, right? So, but that's the biggest question I ask myself every day is, what does my life look like as a 50-year-old man if America is not the largest superpower? What does my children's college experience look like if the United States is not the number one superpower in the world? If my children go into military service, what does that look like if we're the second largest military? Those are questions no generation, my parents didn't have to ask themselves that question. It wasn't until I get back to my grandparents. And that was the generation, yours and our grandparents were the ones that actually saw the rise of the United States. You know, there was a whole generation between them and us that never even had doubts, never had to wonder if the U.S. would be the biggest.
Yeah.
Right? And now you and I have to be ready to let our children graduate into a world where potentially they'll be number two.
Do you think there's a possibility that they are already more advanced?
No. I think there's always a probability. So CIA teaches us to look at all outcomes as probabilities, right? Probabilities and possibilities. So probability is valuable because it's numerical, it's calculatable, it's empirical. So there might be a 2% probability of something happening, which makes it very unlikely, but it's still a possibility, versus a 98% probability. A 98% probability makes something very possible, very likely, but still possibly not true, right? So you've got this large spectrum that you have to consider when you look at probabilities. So is the United States, or is China more advanced than the United States right now? Possibly, but not likely.
Why do you say that? Why do you say not likely?
Because you have to understand that China, starting in like 2001, 2002, early 2000s, they took a very different direction than the United States, right? When 9/11 happened, all of our resources went into terrorism, combating terrorism. Chinese didn't participate in that war, right? So what they did is they used that time frame to start advancing, to start building the infrastructure that we had spent the previous 20 to 30 years building. Mm-hmm. China doesn't have wired telephone lines like we have in the United States. Any American knows what it's like to drive down any road in the United States and see telephone lines. You and I remember what it was like when you could only talk on telephone lines. The United States invented cellular signals. We invented cell phones. We invented cell towers. When the Chinese actually grew up to the place where they could become a first world country, they basically skipped past telephone lines and graduated directly into cellular era. So when our cell network goes down, we'll fall right back to telephone lines. When their cell network goes down, there is no backup.
Okay.
Right? People are going next door neighbor to next door neighbor. It's old school telephone. Tell the person in front of you to tell the person in front of them how things work.
Gotcha.
Right? So they have grown up on our advancement. That's where we are now. That's why you still see issues with intellectual property and you still see issues with corporate espionage and economic espionage. They grow by stealing, reverse engineering, and then programming from there. Maybe they'll make an incremental improvement on what they steal, but for the most part, they're just learning how what they steal even works. And it's not just us they do it to. They steal from Europe, they steal from Russia. They'll steal from everybody to get the whatever is the most advanced thing on the market. Whereas here in the United States, we tend to develop, innovate, create our own economic advantage, right? All the semiconductors and super chips that we're all worried about because they're built in Taiwan, they're all designed here. They're just built there because we don't have a manufacturing base anymore. So that's why I'm not worried that China is already more sophisticated. They beat us to the punch in some things. They've got hypersonic missiles. We're just developing them, right? They've got different technology on aircraft that they've been able to steal from Europe and the Middle East that we're still developing, right? But then you look at other things. Their aircraft carriers don't compare to our aircraft carriers. Their operational, organizational execution of military conflict, their approach to covert influence, or what we would call propaganda, is very, very much behind.
Really? You think they're behind?
They're behind in how they execute it because they have a state-run system. So they can basically blast fake news and withhold real news. That's rudimentary versus what we have in the United States, where free news, truthful news is out there and fake news is out there. That's a whole different, more sophisticated level of misinformation.
If China does take over if they become the world superpower by 2033, what you had mentioned, what does your life look like? Are you preparing for that? What, in your mind, what happens?
So I am preparing for that. My wife is some former CIA. We both have plans in place for what we would do in that situation. And there's something important that I want to make sure that you especially and anybody listening understands. If the United States is no longer the world's largest superpower, then two things happen almost immediately. First, being an American no longer has an advantage. Everything we talked about having $100 in your pocket as an EDC, or having an international credit card, which is most of the banking institutions are American banking institutions, all of that takes second place because now everybody's going to want an HSBC credit card. Now everybody's going to want to have a passport from China, right? If China becomes the world's global superpower, everybody wants to go with China. You and I have actually traveled the world, and we know you, being a Caucasian male, you know exactly what it's like to step into a place and have everybody want your attention. Because once they hear your American accent, they think to themselves, money, power, connections. I mean, it's amazing how much influence outside of the United States being an American gets you. I'm an ambiguously brown guy with big hair. As soon as I pull out that blue passport that says United States on it, I mean, parts of the world open up to us that we've taken for granted because we've never remembered. We've never experienced a life where that little blue passport doesn't get you special perks and attention, right? Everybody wants to be friends with an American because they think America is the land of opportunity. It's the land of freedom. Most countries in the world do not know freedom and do not know opportunity. So when they meet us, we're their ticket. That's how everybody in the world, that's how the vast majority of the world sees Americans. Okay. Their ticket to opportunity, their potential ticket to freedom. If we're no longer the top of the food chain, then we lose that appeal. Because now all of a sudden, you need to have a Chinese passport to have the ticket. You need to have a Chinese identity or a Chinese genetic background for people to take and pay attention to you, right? And that's going to be hard. That's going to be a big, drastic difference for the generation that is our children, because like they're going to know what it's like to have been 13, 14, 15 years old, an American, but then be 23, 24, 25, young professionals starting their careers and be second-class citizens, essentially.
Yeah.
Right? So our plan is that if that's the direction that it goes, we're leaving the United States. There is no advantage to being an American inside the United States if you can basically rebuild your identity somewhere else.
Interesting.
So we would actually immigrate, most likely to Europe, because Europe will still be pro-US. Right? If anything, Europe and the United States are going to be fighting a Chinese hegemony for probably the next 30 years. So go to Europe and essentially establish ourselves as dual-docked citizens. Spend 5 years in Portugal, 5 years in Spain, potentially get into Italy, spend 3 to 5 years building residency somewhere, working towards an EU citizenship, because then you'd become dual docked EU and US. Whenever you're on the losing side of a battle, which nobody likes to talk about, but whenever you're on the losing side of a battle, sometimes the next best thing to do is to blend in and look like a non-threat. If you have a Spanish passport or a Portuguese passport, do you feel intimidated by Spain or Portugal?
No.
So neither will a Chinese. But people, if you're in second place, people feel intimidated by you. So if I had to pick how I was going to travel the world when my children are 25 and I'm in my 60s, I'd rather travel the world under an EU passport as a dual-docked citizen than travel under a US passport and potentially draw the attention and the ire of the world superpower.
Interesting. I love that train of thought. I am surprised to hear you say Europe, considering it's, everything that's going on over there right now.
Oh, yeah.
I've thought about this too. My place, I believe, would be Paraguay.
Yes. So Latin America and the Bahamas too. Well, the Bahamas are part of Latin America. You're thinking on the exact same lines. The main difference, the main reason I wouldn't go south is because first world electricity, first world internet, first world medicine, even if it's on the decline, it'll take probably 2 generations before it fully declines in a first world country. Mm-hmm. So if you're in Italy, Spain, Germany, Poland, the UK, it's going to take 30 to 50 years before that infrastructure actually falls into such disarray because of a lack of economic stimulation. We're talking end times, right? If the world actually starts to decline because the new superpower basically imposes their will on the whole world, if that actually were to happen, it would take decades before those institutions degraded to a place where we would feel it in our everyday lives. But in a place like Paraguay, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Chile, that same degradation would probably happen in about 15 to 20 years. So now you or I might be a 75-year-old man living on a healthcare system in a country that's falling apart. If we're in Latin America. If we're in Europe, we're a 75 or 80-year-old man in a country that still has 25 years more ahead of it of working healthcare system.
Hey everybody, I'm Shawn Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Shawn Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.
According to an op-ed in the Washington Post today, the CIA shares intelligence with the Taliban, so we have an official intelligence sharing relationship with the Taliban. The Darien Pass is the focus. The Darien Pass is where they're all going through. The Darien Pass is your choke point.
Where is that?
It's kind of like in Panama. If we don't have their biometrics in our system, how do we know they're terrorists? We don't even know who they are. And remember, if they're coming as an Afghan on a fake Taliban passport, it doesn't have the biometrics we had anyway.
What is Taliban's relationship with the U.S. now? Are we...
According to an op-ed in the Washington Post today, the CIA shares intelligence with the Taliban, so we have an official intelligence sharing relationship with the Taliban.
I can't believe it doesn't even seem real. Does it?
I can barely take it every single day. Especially with just how many Al-Qaeda members are currently in Afghanistan. The thing is, we know Benghazi was covered up, that Al-Qaeda led the attack, right? People shouldn't have allowed it to happen. They did. Now, should we have learned our lesson? Like, we cannot let the U.S. government cover up Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. I'm sorry. I feel like people are like, we've done this for 20 years. No, like, we're going to say something. We're going to report it if you don't or if the press doesn't. Like, I do think people need to step up now. That we have so many experts on Afghanistan. We have so many allies in Afghanistan. We can pull out all the information ourselves. If the government's not going to do the right thing, then everybody who has contacts in Afghanistan needs to be putting the information out.
Where do you think, so they're doing all this training and stuff in Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda and all these international terrorists. Do you think they're going to start coming up through our southern borders?
Oh, they've already started.
Do you know that for a fact?
Yes.
How do you know that?
I know that because I was told several different times about group pockets of terrorists, so like 6, 8. There was one larger one, maybe 25 to 50. I think it was 50, that procured passports from the Afghan government with the sole purpose of coming to our southern border. One was ISIS. It was only a group of 8. The ISIS terrorists got the passports. They went to Iran. Their goal was Iran, Turkey, Brazilian visa, and then come up through the Darien Pass. I forget if it was 25 or 50, sorry. That was Haqqani Network. Their goal was, they're Haqqani Network. They run the Ministry of Interior, so they all got the passports. Their goal was Turkey to Brazil. I mean, the key is Brazil. And then Al-Qaeda has also sent attackers on the same routes. And
Why is Brazil a key?
because it's easy to get a humanitarian Brazil visa, and then there's no real security to stop you from leaving. So then you just now go illegally up through the Darien Pass.
Okay.
The Darien Pass is the focus. The Darien Pass is where they're all going through. The Darien Pass is your choke point.
Where is that?
It's kind of like in Panama.
Okay.
And it's super dangerous. Like if 10 Afghans go in, maybe 6 come out.
Really? Why is that?
There is murders, rapes, robberies, animal attacks. Like I seriously know someone who told me that the Afghan died by like a large wild cat, like a cougar or whatever is the local one there. So yeah, diseases. Even if they get through and then get picked up by the Panamanians, there's a lot of torture and abuse.
So what? Hold on. Why is it so dangerous there? This is a section of Panama.
I think because so many criminals maybe are going through it.
It's just extreme poverty.
I think it's just like it's the jungle, right? It's like kind of a real wild, wild west. Mm-hmm. And that's where everybody's targeting to travel through. So it's not exactly Brazil. Brazil's just the easiest part to get through this pipeline up.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's the easiest country to infiltrate.
Brazil is, yes.
For the beginning of their journey.
Mm-hmm.
How many terrorists, do you know approximately how many terrorists we've caught trying to cross the southern border? I wouldn't imagine it's very many. It seems like the southern border is pretty wide open.
I don't know, because like last year, I thought there was like 20 in a month or something. I feel like maybe in this year it was like 100 or so. I don't know the exact number. I know we're missing a lot.
Yeah, I mean, these are only who we've caught and who we have biometrics for, mm-hmm. right? Because if we don't have their biometrics in our system, how do we know they're terrorists? We don't even know what they are. And remember, if they're coming as an Afghan on a fake Taliban passport, it doesn't have the biometrics we had anyway. It doesn't have the name we have watch listed. It doesn't even probably have the ethnicity. If you're Pakistani and you went and got a passport from the Taliban, assume you're an Afghan. That's a good point. Have we interrogated anybody that they have caught crossing the border? I mean,
I'm assuming. I just don't have access to that. But they are in detention facilities, if that's what you're asking.
Are you aware of any of the motivations?
I just have not seen any debriefings. And luckily, I have not known a terrorist that's come over, thank heavens.
Okay. All right.
Hey everybody, I'm Shawn Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Shawn Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.
Last time I was on the show, I told you we just found out one of our top 10 attackers at the Benghazi attacks was in Afghanistan. His name is Hamza al-Darnawi. While following him, we found actually the number one target of our investigation. So we've never made the number one target of our investigation public. So he's the number one target for stopping them from killing anyone else.
How are you getting the information of them coming up through the southern border?
Well, the one thing is a lot of them just show up in the border, as you can imagine. So we luckily have the encounters. The problem is the U.S. government skewing those numbers, right? So when there's encounters at the border, they do kind of like Latin American, other, like they don't have it listed by country. So you can't go and look and be like, oh, 1,000 Egyptians came, 2,000 Syrians came, etc. So we're obviously concerned with the terrorists leaving Afghanistan, because what has happened is, as we talked about last time, is, the Taliban is issuing these passports to terrorists, and they're doing two different things. So one is they're just sending fighters, trained fighters. They actually don't have, it's not like the old days, you trained in your little cell and your cell's gonna be deployed and you're gonna do attack. Al-Qaeda now is just training them and then forward deploying them. And then the interesting part is they are forward deploying senior Al-Qaeda members who will then guide them when they're ready. So Al-Qaeda has taken guys that have been in Al-Qaeda for 20 years, given them Afghan passports. So let's say they took an Egyptian as a good example. He has now an Afghan passport, and they're deploying them to the US, the Middle East, and Europe. And then now they're going to be kind of like the command central for then the terrorists who've all been trained, and then they'll tell them what to do. So I think that's like a really interesting thing. Like we have a change in the terrorist tactics. You're not going to see the cell doing things as you always saw in the past. So I think people need to understand that. And then the other thing is,
before we move on, what are they training on? Is this, I mean, when we would see their training camps before, when the wars were both kicking, it was physical endurance, it was urban kind of warfare, it was shooting. What kind of stuff are they training on now? Do you have any insight into that?
Sure. If we just focus on the Al-Qaeda camps. So in Afghanistan right now, there's 30 Al-Qaeda training camps. 7 of them are suicide bomber only. So 7 of them, you're only in it to be a suicide bomber. The rest of them, it's just your standard. Like I said, there's an urban warfare camp, which I think is for a specific threat. But there's just your usual weapons. There's actually driving training. It's what you'd expect. There is not the IED making, that type of stuff. There's not like a new training piece, if that makes sense. But
same old tactics that we've seen in the war that are coming, but now everybody in America is going to see these tactics carried out at some point.
Yeah, correct. Because remember, back when we had a war with Afghanistan, it was like that country had the weakest passport in the world, right? Now everyone's trying to save Afghans. So all these foreigners now have Afghan passports and nobody knows they're Afghan. And as we've learned, everyone drops their IDs at the border anyway. You don't know if someone's Iraqi, Syrian, Afghan. I mean, there is like no vetting of these people, right? We don't even know who these people are. And we're not going to be able to vet them anyway, as you can imagine. So if you have 30 new Al-Qaeda training camps, these are all new recruits. Like, people don't understand this, right? This is Mohammed, never been a terrorist in his whole life. His fingerprints aren't in any system. His photo's not in a system. He's not on a U.S. watch list. He's not marked as a terrorist. Even when we have terrorists on watch lists, I think a lot of people don't understand. A terrorist on a watch list does not mean we can get them at a border. So like a really good example is, we talked about Mullah Berader in the past, who I caught. So he spent many years in Pakistan. So in Pakistan, he lived there with a Pakistani passport under a Pakistani identity. So his name was Mohammed Arif, okay? Now, if you look at his Pakistani passport, and he would take that to the southern border, no one would ever know he's Mullah Berader, right? Because the U.S. government had an estimated date for him, so you don't have a date of birth. And then his passport in Pakistan only has a year of birth. I think it was like 1963. That's not useful. The name on the passport's different, so the name you have on watch listed isn't going to matter. The father's name on the passport's different. The nationality on the passport's different, right? So there is no way, if he came to the border as one of the most top 21 terrorists in the world at the time, he would have come in right just fine, and no one would have known they let a terrorist in.
Wow. Man, are you aware of any camps within the U.S., any of these sleeper cells?
I'm not aware of any camps. At least what I know is they're pre-training. At least Al-Qaeda's pre-training. One of the guys we're following, is actually doing the passports. Do you want me to get into that
Let's
right
do
now?
it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So obviously last time I was on the show, I told you we just found out one of our top 10 attackers at the Benghazi attacks was in Afghanistan. His name is Hamza al-Darnawi. So we started following him in September. And while following him, we found actually the number one target of our investigation. So we've never made the number one target of our investigation public. So this will be the first time anyone actually hears about him. So when we went to investigate the Benghazi attacks, we had two goals, right? Bring the attackers to justice and stop them from killing anyone else. So he's the number one target for stopping them from killing anyone else. So this individual, his name is Abdul Azim Ali Musa Ben Ali, long name. And then if you're Libyan, he's from the Al-Darsi family. He doesn't use the Al-Darsi as part of his name, but legally it could be. So we just call him Musa for short, me and Boone. So back in the day, he fought like everyone with Al-Qaeda in the Mujahideen era. And then he became a clandestine officer in Al-Qaeda. So what we did in our investigation, we're like, hey, he thinks he's kind of like this undercover CIA guy in Al-Qaeda. Let's follow him that way. So we've never shared publicly that we're following him. The really interesting part is he's had one job forever in Al-Qaeda, and it is to make the fake travel documents for Al-Qaeda's external operatives. So he started all the way back in Afghanistan back in the day. He made the documents for our Benghazi attackers. So we've talked. So what a lot of people don't get is when our Benghazi attacks happen, then a huge chunk of the terrorists went to the airport and got on airplanes. They thought the U.S. military was going to come in and rain hell on Benghazi. They left. So that all their passports were made in advance. A lot of people don't understand this. And actually, one of the people with the fake passports, he was an Al-Qaeda and Iraq guy, got captured in Turkey. And the crazy part is the U.S. didn't ask to extradite him. He got sent to Tunisia, and then he got released, and then our government said, oh, we're following him. They didn't. He killed a couple political leaders in Tunisia, and then he went to Syria, and luckily we ended up getting both him and his brother in strikes in Syria later on, but they were terrorists for many years after Benghazi. Then the crazy part is Musa then went on, and I don't know if you ever remember the name, the Khorasan Group.
Mm-mm.
So basically, kind of around the time of the Benghazi attacks, Al-Qaeda was like, hey, we need to focus all of our external operations into one place, right? Like we need basically a group in Al-Qaeda that only does external operations, so focus on Europe and the US mostly. So it became this Khorasan group. And it was led by a guy named Muslim Fadl. And it became the U.S.'s top priority, as you can imagine, right? It's like, hey, they're going to be the ones doing the attacks. Let's start striking them. And so the U.S. started striking them and basically wiped out the Khorasan groups. Musa was the Khorasan group's sole travel facilitator for Turkey. And most of their travel documents were Turkish, because as you can imagine, Turkey is a really easy travel document to get because of fraud and everything, and it gets you into Europe, right? So he was that group's only trusted facilitator. That's how important he is. Then during this whole time, he's doing AQIM, so Al-Qaeda's North Africa branch, obviously. That's who did our attacks. Then he goes on and starts doing the travel documents for the Al-Badr Brigade. A lot of people don't know what the Al-Badr Brigade is, but if I tell you like what they did, you'll know. So do you remember the Ariana Grande concert? Mm-hmm. They did that. Remember the multiple attacks in France when they hit the Bataclan? That was also Al-Badr Mujahideen guys.
Okay.
So they were basically the Libyan terrorists, and a lot of them came from our attacks, that went to Syria. And at the time in Syria, you could join two terrorist groups. You could join the Al-Nusra Front, and their leader was just killed yesterday, the original leader actually, or you can join ISIS, right? So a lot of the ones from Libya are steered toward ISIS, but Libyans have this weird thing where they make their own groups. And so the ones who steered toward ISIS instead of al-Nusra started calling themselves the Al-Badr Brigade. So that's where they came from. So anyway, so we have Musa till that point. Okay, and then we lose him in our investigation. So we have him basically, he's in Libya, he's in Syria, he's in Turkey, and he spent some time in France during this, as you can imagine, because there was French attacks. He spent time in Nice. So we lose him completely. So we're thinking he's living just under an assumed identity, since he can make any of them, in Turkey or Syria. So lo and behold, we're following Hamza al-Darnawi, and he goes and sees Musa in Afghanistan. So we find out Musa's been hiding all these years and been protected by the Iranian government in Iran. So he's been in Iran. So of course, then we're like, well, what's Musa doing in Afghanistan? He has to be doing travel documents. So lo and behold, Musa works for Sirajuddin Haqqani in the Taliban's Ministry of Interior, and his sole job is he makes all the fake travel documents for Al-Qaeda's external operatives who are leaving from Afghanistan. So he was involved in Benghazi. He's been ignored since Benghazi, and now he is the one man that knows every terrorist Al-Qaeda is deploying from Afghanistan.
Whoa. And we have no interest in him.
None. And did I not say Sirajuddin Haqqani is his boss, and we're giving Sirajuddin Haqqani money weekly?
Yeah, we're gonna get into that shortly. But
Yep.
I can't. How is this guy not on anybody's radar?
I don't know.
Well, let's get back to the sleeper cells real quick within the U.S. Why do you think we haven't seen anything happen yet? This has been open for years and years. Even before this administration, the border was pretty wide open.
The border was open, but not at the point where 7 million were coming in. And also remember, it wasn't easy for these people to travel from like the Afghanistan border region to here. Now these pipelines are open. Like I told you, there's these illegal flights from India. Those weren't flying, right? There's these routes from, Iran and Turkey and Brazil. Those didn't really exist. Like this is all kind of like a new phenomenon. And so a lot of people don't realize like it's changed. The situation's changed, right? And I don't even think the terrorists put a huge focus on targeting the southern border. You got to remember, a lot of terrorists get in here legally, right? The 9/11 attackers got in here legally. We brought in a lot of terrorists during the Kabul evac illegally. Even, I talk about Mullah Berader, who I captured. So his wife's sister lives in Virginia, and in the last couple of years, the U.S. has let Mullah Berader's wife come to Virginia and see her sister. So the U.S. government has no problem issuing real visas to terrorists, and terrorists know this, right? Especially, Muslim Brotherhood's very involved in this type of stuff. So the southern border wasn't always the biggest focus because we have huge loopholes. I mean, the biggest loophole was obviously student visas. That's what the 9/11 attackers did. We obviously now have a humanitarian loophole, right? We have all these people we're trying to save that, may have been our allies in Afghanistan. So you just have to remember, terrorists take advantage of what is available at the time. Right now, the southern border is the easiest to take advantage of.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts. Are you serious?
Swear to God.
I mean, we're funding them again now, right?
I think we send like $40 million a week.
$40 million a week goes to Taliban.
Yes. And the bomber that Tyler had his eyes on was captured in India.
Are you serious?
Swear to God.
So this goes way back.
Oh, yeah. And they had the plan before I captured him. Like, the day we captured him, our chief brought us in the office in Islamabad. Well, we flew back up from Karachi, and he brought me and then the other guy who were going to be the lead debriefers, and he gave us a heads up. He said, FYI, he said, this is the number one focus in the White House. They want to bring out this Holbrooke guy. They want to take it over from Islamabad Station. They don't even want you guys debriefing him. So he fought for us to debrief him, but they pulled everything. They sent a psychiatrist out to watch our sessions to make sure we had rapport with him. I kid you not. They made sure his detainee debriefers had rapport with him. Like, they were already kissing his butt right after we caught him. So yeah, and so he ended up getting released, and then he was the key U.S. Intermediary with the Taliban to make the peace deal. And I tell you, this guy, I mean, I really liked most terrorists I met. I know that sounds really bad, because, when you're on a human-to-human level and you're just talking to him, this guy was smart. He was charismatic. I mean, he was probably a genius, because he was locked up. But he could remember he told you something like 5 days ago. Like, he knew exactly when he told you stuff. He could defend anything. So if you said, hey, the Taliban did X, he would give you a really good justification why. And you'd be like, oh, yeah, that actually makes sense. Or I see the logic. Like, one of the things is right after the fall. So the U.S. went in after 9/11, and they beat the Taliban in like 5 weeks. I mean, it was amazing. Like, rah, USA. I mean, they really kicked ass. They toppled the Taliban. So the Taliban basically all went home. So Mullah Brader, in my theory, first took Mullah Omar and he hit him. So he hit him in a ruse gun, and Mullah Omar, I don't think, ever left there. Brader went home to, like, the home his dad owns. And they were like, we lost, we're done. Well, as you know, bin Laden crossed Tora Bora into Pakistan. So our war now on Al-Qaeda was kind of over, and it was like, oh gosh, we moved this whole war machine to Afghanistan, we beat the Taliban, and bin Laden's gone, what are we gonna do? So they decided we're gonna go target the old Taliban leaders, even though that we just beat the Taliban. So they made a hit list of the senior Taliban leaders, and then they came and bombed Barader's house. So at that point, he said, screw this, I'm going on offense. Like, you beat us, and then you come back here months later and you bomb my house, and they actually injured his dad, so that didn't help. And then that's when he triggered over and said, okay, game's on, Taliban's back, like, you didn't win. And that's when he went full back in.
No kidding.
Right? So when he tells that story, I'm like, heck yeah, you come and bomb my dad, I'm in. So yeah, he would always have like a good story like that. So I can see how he would meet with U.S. policymakers and be very persuasive. Especially because, remember, they didn't view the Taliban as a terrorist group. They still view them as a political group, even though they like kidnap people, murder people, torture people, they rape women, they rape children. Like, they still call them a political organization. It blows my mind.
We're funding them again now, right?
I think we send like $40 million a week.
$40 million a week goes to Taliban.
Yes.
Who are taking our allies, lining them up like dogs.
Yep.
And shooting them in the back of the head.
Ugh.
And we're funding that.
And that's kind of what you hope they do. I mean, I've got videos that are very, very painful deaths.
What kind of deaths?
Torture deaths, some really bad beheading deaths of our allies,
These are all the guys we used to work with over there.
Yeah, a lot of the people who worked with them get the video sent to them during or after. It's a taunt. They were taunting when the airport was still open. Like, when people were trying to get to the airport as refugees, remember the U.S. military, they were there, but they couldn't respond in any way to the situation going on. So to taunt them, the Taliban would grab a woman and shoot her in the head. They would burn a child alive in front of the military because they knew they couldn't act.
Yeah, I interviewed... Do you know Tyler Vargas Andrews by chance?
We haven't met in person, but I'm in the Moral Compass Federation, and he's in the Federation with us.
Oh, man, what an amazing human being he is. But, he was describing some of the stuff that he saw. And then, I worked over there for a long time, too. And we probably ran into each other without knowing it. But I had people sending me videos and cell phone clips of what they were doing, and I wish I could post it on here, or I wish I could embed it into this interview just to show people what's happening over there. What does it look like to see a infant burned alive, to taunt? What does it look like to see the people that you used to work with lined up in the mud and just shot in the back of the head, just going down the line, They don't put that on the news. These people need to see that.
Yeah, they don't put it on the news, and they also didn't give any help to these poor people who had to stand there and watch that. You know, our servicemen, like the trauma they had to stand there and watch and endure. They actually came back here, and, you know, a lot of them were told, we don't want to hear you talk about Afghanistan.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's funny you bring it up because we were talking about India, and you know, the bomber that Tyler had his eyes on was captured in India.
Did he?
Yes.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So in 2017, ISIS deployed him to do an attack in New Delhi, India, and he went over there with the ruse of being like an engineer student and like started college. And then he was casing a few locations like the New Delhi airport, like the mall, and the Indians or the CIA. I was on the CIA at the time. One of them infiltrated the network of ISIS he was in and found out who he was. And they did a capture of him in India, and then they sent him to Bagram. So he was in Bagram from 2017 until July 1st, when we snuck out in the middle of the night, July 1st, 2021. We left in the middle of the night, didn't tell the commander of Bagram we were leaving. He comes in the morning, and the Taliban and terrorists are breaking all the prisoners out. That's when he got to prison. So we had him in custody for all those years. And the crazy part is I found out who the bomber was even before it was in the press, because my guy who gives me ISIS stuff for Libya sent me the photo in like the middle of the night. And I get a photo from him, and it's got a little bit of Arab text. And then he wrote in Arabic something. So I get up and I translate it. And I've honestly had not slept in a week at that point because I just got people into the Kabul airport. And I was like, oh gosh, but it's Libya. You know, like I thought it was a Libyan terrorist. And so I was all getting up for it. And it said, you know, this man's important. You need to look into him. And so I translate the name on the picture, and it says Logari. And so I write back, why are you sending me an Afghan? It's like, it's still not even dawning on me that he's sending me somebody to do with the attacks, right? And so he writes back again, look at him. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so I try searching the name, and I'm not getting anything on the name. And it dawns on me, and I said, was he involved in the Kabul airport attack? And he said, yeah. I didn't know he was a suicide bomber at that second. I thought maybe he was the planner. Because usually you don't know the bomber. They just take some low-level guy and, you know. And so, yeah, but that's how I found out. And then maybe within the next day, it hit the press, who he was. But yeah, so.
Hey everybody, I'm Shawn Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Shawn Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes, so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.
He basically made the whole peace deal that turned Afghanistan over to the Taliban.
This is the co-founder of the Taliban.
Yeah, he was number 2 at the time of the Taliban. Yeah, but he is one of the founders. Yeah. Maya, of all people, from the Bin Laden raid, like stepped in and was like, you need to collect. I don't give a damn what you think. We're the CIA. She was really funny, and she defended me. He was the lead operational commander of the Taliban. So in my head, he's the lead ops guy. So every U.S. soldier dying in Afghanistan, it's on his shoulders, right? That's the way I viewed him as a target.
Led the capture of Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar. Did I say that correct?
Yes. So, I mean, again, you know, if you've seen my book, this is known. Mullah Baradar, as everyone now knows, he basically made the whole peace deal that turned Afghanistan over to the Taliban. So back in 2009, I started targeting him, and we captured him in 2018. The really interesting part is he had really good OPSEC. To where, like, I wanted to capture him, but I was like, I don't think, like, even if he got on a phone, he was on it like a minute, you know? And I even had a senior boss, so the deputy chief of station, one time, like, stopped me in one of our big meetings that we had weekly, and he said, Sarah, why are you still briefing this? You're never going to get Mullah Baradar on a phone. Like, he said that in front of the whole station, right? And it's like I knew I probably wouldn't. And as you know how life is. So it's funny, the people who collect signals intelligence, even the guy that was supposed to do it for us did not believe my phones were braiders. And he actually was refusing to collect on them. And then Maya, of all people from the Bin Laden raid, stepped in and was like, you need to collect. I don't give a damn what you think. We're the CIA. She was really funny and she defended me. But I don't think he actually collected it. So how it works in the CIA is you always do side things. So I had someone in another location collecting the phones for me. So I was in another city in Pakistan and coming back to Islamabad, and that person calls me. And she said, you won't believe it. Berater's phone is up, but it's been up your whole flight. And I said, that doesn't make any sense. She's like, yeah, it hasn't turned off. And I said, how weird. And I said, keep me in the loop. I'm going to see if we can get a capture going. And so I went to the leaders in Islamabad. And the crazy part is, did you ever hear about the COS conference?
I didn't.
Okay, there's this time of the year, hopefully the time changes every year, that they all get together and have a big meeting. So we had no leaders. Our top 3 were gone. And then the leader, the chief of base from where he was located was gone. So the only boss there was our chief of liaison at the time, and so I went and said, hey, I need to get a team to go capture Berater. He's like, let me think about it. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I didn't even go back and ask him. So I went down to where the team sit and I said, hey, I need 2 guys to go to Karachi. And they said, yeah, we got 2 in Lahore. We'll move them from that. And then I booked a flight and I went straight down there. And then, so I'm traveling, right? And I'm checking in with this girl and she's like, the phone is still on. And I was like, no way. Well, at first we assumed he lived in Karachi, which he ended up doing. And that's where our capture was. But the phone's in Quetta. So I said, okay, let's just capture him in Quetta. If the phone's up in Quetta, why would we wait till he comes to Karachi? So I called the boss in Quetta. And did you ever see Gone in 60 Seconds? And he had Eleanor.
Uh-huh.
So it was the car he never could get, and something always went wrong with it. So our boss in Quetta had a terrorist like that. He was like a deputy shadow governor for Helmand. He was the shadow governor for a really famous Taliban commander named Mullah Naeem Barich. I think his name was Tahir Shah. And he was in town that day. And this guy tried to get Tahir Shah every time he was in town. We probably should see how much money we've wasted on capturing this guy because we failed every time. So, of course, I call him. He's like, Tahir Shah's in town. And I said, dude, I'm saying Berater. And he's like, I don't think it's really Berater. He's like, I'm going to go for Tahir Shah, and then I'll go for Berater if we don't get Shah. So they spent the first half of the day going for the guy he's never been able to get, and they didn't get him, and then Berater moves. So then, my friend's like, he's driving, he's going home to Karachi, and I'm like, yes. So at this time, I've already decided. I said, this is his kid. There's no way Berater rode to another city with his phone and rode back. So I said, his kid has the phone. Now we can only capture him at home. Because, you don't want to pick some kid up at a restaurant or something. So we waited till the phone went back, and then it went back to the exact neighborhood we thought he lived in. And then we did the capture operation. So we just got really lucky. His kid stole an old phone out of the closet and brought it on a trip with his dad.
And this is the co-founder of the Taliban.
Yeah, he was number 2 at the time of the Taliban. Yeah, but he is one of the founders. Yeah.
How old was he?
Maybe 55. It's really hard to tell.
Yeah.
But he was probably about 55.
So how long? What is the process like when you want to do a strike or a capture?
Well, luckily, because he was number 2 of the Taliban, we had approvals to capture him. So we'd already gone to lawyers and got the top 10 of the Taliban. So that's what we had at the time. We had a list of 10 Taliban people we were allowed to capture. So I didn't have to go ask any permissions to capture him. So then usually you go to your COS and get approval. Well, my COS was gone.
COS is chief of station. That will be the head agency officer in charge of the entire country.
Yeah. So I would go to him, especially at that high of a capture, and ask his permission, but he wasn't there. And the number 2 wasn't there, and number 3 wasn't there, and number 4 wasn't going to give me an answer. So then I just went straight to where Berater lived, and then that COB was gone, and she was replaced by like a friend of mine. And so he's like, let's do it. So we really got no approvals because nobody was in country. That's how we got Breeder.
How long does it normally take? Let's say they're not on the top 10 list.
Oh, if they're not on the top 10 list, you actually have to go to the CIA lawyers and get approvals, and that could take months.
Months.
If you've never got approval to go after a guy, yeah.
What are your strikes usually? Are they captures? Are they drone strikes? Are they send it in teams?
Depends on what you're working. So I was working Taliban, so we didn't really have lethal approvals on Taliban. Maybe we had a Mullah Omar. So we had to capture Taliban. Because remember, the government still called them a political group. They weren't a terrorist organization.
Mm-hmm.
So we weren't really allowed to put Taliban, under a drone strike, but we really couldn't anyway. They were in Quetta, Karachi, Peshawar. It wasn't like they were in Waziristan.
Yeah.
Al-Qaeda, most of those targets, obviously, the attempt was drone strikes because of the locations of the country they were in. But if they're in the settled areas, obviously like Lahore or something, you'd have to capture them.
Okay. So as a targeter, you're attached to a certain group.
Correct.
Okay.
Or it can depend. So you can be attached to a group, you can be attached to a region, you can be attached to a city. So at that time, my job was the top 3 of the Taliban, and then anything in Karachi. So it could be Al-Qaeda, it could be Shia groups. It didn't matter. It could be organized crime. So I did any targeting in Karachi.
Okay. What's it feel like when you get these guys?
It was pretty exciting. The interesting part was, though, no one believed I really got him. So we got his photo, and of course they sent it first to a CIA asset that I always said was crap over in Afghanistan. He didn't ID the photo. So everyone's like, it's not him. I said, no, it's him. That source is crap, and you need to finally fire him. And then we finally got it into sources that did actually know him and weren't feeding us garbage. Because as you know, a lot of sources in Afghanistan fed us a bunch of garbage, got paid for it, and then they worked for 3 other intelligence agencies. So yeah, I mean, it was good to get him. In retrospect, though, I realized right away that I wanted to get him because he was number 2 of the Taliban, and he was the lead operational commander of the Taliban. So in my head, he's the lead ops guy. So every U.S. soldier dying in Afghanistan, it's on his shoulders, right? That's the way I viewed him as a target. Mm-hmm. When we got him in a room and we started getting questions from what the CIA wanted from him, that's when I actually learned that the president at the time, President Obama, had appointed the special envoy, and his name was Richard Holbrooke, and his goal was to do Taliban reconciliation. And their main focus, and they had made some assessment, and the only way they could reconcile with the Taliban was to use Mullah Berater. So we sit down with him and want to collect info to go target other Taliban members, right? Because that's what I do. I go after the bad guys, and I find out all my questions are, who would you be okay with coming to meet with you about peace? We would list off names of countries. Would you be okay if Japan came, the Brits came, all this strange stuff? And I was like, oh my gosh, they only want this guy for reconciliation. And that kind of became, that's when I saw, we're going to make a deal with the Taliban, and we're going to give part of the government back to the Taliban. I didn't think it was going to be what today was. So if I went back in time, I never would have captured him, because he is the reason the whole country fell.
Hey everybody, I'm Shawn Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Shawn Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes, so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's Chinese law that any development in the space, in the business, Chinese military has 100% access to.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that correct?
Yeah, they call it civilian military fusion. And so what it means is, let's say you and I, move to Beijing, Not going to happen, but let's say it does. Unless you got plans I don't know about.
I think I'm right. Good. I'm good here in Tennessee.
Yeah. But if we went to Beijing and we said, we want to create a company that makes software related to library books or whatever. If that technology is new and unique and has a military application, we are required by law. We'll be thrown in jail in China if we do not share that with the government. That's something that President Xi instituted when he came in. So that's exactly right. Anything that's developed there, any of this artificial intelligence research that's being sponsored by US tech companies in China, you can bet is being applied to the military because that's the requirement by law.
P. Diddy has been getting away with all kinds of stuff. There was that shooting that he walked from. We've seen some clips of him beating on women. I mean, that's pretty standard operating procedure for him. But now there's 8 lawsuits that have been filed against him for sexual assault. And then in 1993, he and Clive Davis founded Bad Boy Records. Clive Davis... How do you describe Clive Davis? There's an infomercial about him now, which is a document. It's being called a documentary. And it makes him look like this benign octogenarian that's helped all these rock stars with their careers. But people in the music industry really don't like Clive Davis, most of them. And his criminality is kind of amazing. He got busted. He's been for filing false tax returns 3 times and then defrauding the IRS 3 times. He was involved in the biggest payola scandal. That's when record companies give money to radio stations to play their songs. Mm-hmm. He was part of the biggest payola scandal of all time as president of ABC Records. And then there was a Genovese crime guy named Pasquale Falcone. And he got busted smuggling 22 pounds of heroin into the United States. And the Justice Department started digging into him, and they came across all these shell companies that he headed. And Clive Davis was funneling money from ABC Records to these shell companies. So I've just told you about 2 decades worth of criminality by Clive Davis. And that guy has not spent 1 night in jail. That's what's amazing about him. So in 1993, I think he takes P. Diddy by the hand and they get on the yellow brick road. And P. Diddy has been engaged in all kind of criminal behavior, but nothing has come out. And I believe for Clive Davis, this is just my surmise, for a guy to commit as many felonies as he's committed and not spend a day in jail, I believe he's working for the government on some level as an informant. I mean, who knows? But so an
informant for what? What makes you think he's working for the government?
I would say like an informant for the FBI or...
For what? What would they be collecting?
I mean, a guy in that position, I'm sure, has quite a panoramic view of certain types of corruption and criminality.
Where? In what realm?
In the music realm.
Do you think the FBI is actually interested in the music realm?
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of laws on the books about what people could, like the payola scandal. It's against the law for people to give money, for record companies to give money to radio stations. And who knows? I mean, I've heard that that's still going on, but the FBI might want. It's difficult to know. I mean, the FBI might want to enforce that law.
I mean, the Epstein stuff totally makes sense to me. It totally makes sense how that guy would be in intelligence and in holding as many U.S. politicians and elites as they possibly can with blackmail. That makes perfect sense to me. I'm not familiar with this man. I don't think that would be on the same level, And I have no idea. This is the first I'm hearing about this, so just take whatever I'm saying with a grain of salt. But it seems very low level compared to the Epstein stuff.
Well, the thing about Clive Davis and why I'm suspicious of Clive Davis is how do you commit that many felonies and not spend a day in jail?
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
And then he gets busted committing felonies, and then he gets like the next great record executive job. And then he gets busted doing something else, and then he gets the next great record executive job. So I think that the only way that you can commit those kind of felonies and not spend a night in jail is if you've got something worked out.
Do you think they're holding him? Do you think he may be some type of an informant to blackmail artists into messaging whatever narrative they want in the public eye through musicians? It's
difficult to know, but people think of the power that musicians, rock stars have.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. I mean, I can't remember the numbers, but they say Taylor Swift could influence an enormous percentage of the U.S. population in an election, and so that's why I'm asking. I'm not 100%. Actually, I have no idea who Davis is affiliated with, what kind of musicians he's affiliated with.
The biggest names.
As in who?
Bruce Springsteen. I mean,
okay.
I mean, people like that. He's launched a lot of.
So he could be blackmailing elite musicians to message particular narratives for FBI, CIA.
That's the thing. I just don't know. I mean, but how does a guy commit that many felonies and not spend a day in jail? That is with Clive Davis, that's what I've been trying to get my mind around. And the only thing I can think of is he's an informant of some kind. I mean, if you or I got busted defrauding the IRS just once, we'd probably have to spend some time in jail.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they put Bernie Carrick in prison for, was it tax evasion for paying for paying his nanny cash. That's tax evasion.
So how does this guy...
I mean, how does everybody pay... I mean, everybody who has lawn care service, are those... is that on the books? Yeah. You know what I mean? Give me a break. So
how does a guy get... I mean, he's defrauded... He's been busted defrauding the IRS 3 times. I mean, and filing false tax returns 3 times. So... how does it, and then that's not even getting into the payola and the shell companies that he's hooking up with the Genovese guy. I just don't understand how that guy doesn't spend a day in jail.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how there's a documentary about him. Well, I kind of understand that. That makes him not to be this benign octogenarian.
Only reason I'm asking is I'm just curious what you think that intelligence agencies would get out of having him on the books. Other than the only thing that can come to my mind is messaging.
Messaging, like rock stars have a tremendous amount of power.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, who knows? With Clive Davis, I live in New York City and I know some people in the music industry. And they look at him as like the Antichrist. I mean,
really?
Yeah. There's this infomercial, aka documentary about him that, as I said, makes him look as a kindly octogenarian. But the people that I know in the music industry do not hold Clive Davis in very high regard. And in 1993, he hooks up with P. Diddy, and they launch Bad Boy Records, which becomes this unbelievable success. Now, P. Diddy has been getting away with all kinds of stuff. There was that shooting that he walked from. Shine took the fall for it. And we've seen some clips of him beating on women. I mean, that's pretty standard operating procedure for him. But now there's 8 lawsuits that have been filed against him for sexual assault.
Didn't he skip the country immediately after his place was busted?
Well, he was going to skip the country,
He didn't.
but I think he stayed in Florida. And I could be wrong there, but he's got these 8 lawsuits. 2 of them are minors. 2 of the women that are suing him were minors when he molested them. And he molested them in a very brutal manner.
How so?
Well, they were minors and he was very forceful. And then the 5th lawsuit has been filed by Little Rod, who also claims that he was sexually assaulted. But he said, and this is where a lot of the traction is coming from in the media, he was talking about like Cuba Gooding Jr. and other people being in on P. Diddy's sexual sexapades or sex escapades. And but Little Rod said that P. Diddy was trafficking minors too. So we've got 3 accounts of P. Diddy trafficking minors. And his houses in LA were searched and Miami. And there was hidden cameras. And Homeland Security, it's kind of strange. Homeland Security were the people that like spearheaded the investigation. It's usually the FBI that does that. Homeland Security does have a human trafficking division, so it's entirely possible that it's on the up and up, but I'm not quite sure because those search warrants emanated from the Southern District of New York. And why would the Southern District of New York execute search warrants in LA and also Miami? Why wouldn't they just have the U.S. Attorney for Los Angeles or Miami execute those search warrants? And the fact that they emanated from the Southern District, that the U.S. Attorney there is Damian Williams. And Damian Williams, because it's Damian Williams, we know the fix is in. And this is the nexus between Epstein. Damian Williams is the nexus between Epstein and P. Diddy.
Interesting.
Williams was the one, the trial of Maxwell, there were 4 Epstein victims that were called to testify. Now, those victims had only been molested by Epstein and Maxwell. They had not been molested by any of the power brokers. That was a very carefully choreographed trial. And I know a woman who covered that trial for a media outlet, and she agreed with me that it was very carefully choreographed. And Damian Williams oversaw that. He was a U.S. attorney that oversaw that trial. And he made sure that no one could be indicted other than Maxwell. And so now he's in charge of the P. Diddy investigation. And
Interesting.
And he's ostensibly, there's a grand jury now that's been impaneled to look into the P. Diddy investigation. So with grand juries, a special prosecutor is chosen for a grand jury. And grand jurors are just people that have shown up for jury duty and have been called to a grand jury. So special prosecutors can really twist the opinions and minds of grand jurors because only the evidence that the special prosecutor wants shown and only the witnesses that the special prosecutor calls, that's the information that the grand jurors get.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.
Back in the 70s, the Rand Corporation published a...
Why would top military advisors or anybody leak that information to you?
They said that they could go coast to coast. I think it was half an hour or 40 minutes.
Nothing's coming out.
How many of these deep underground military bases exist, where are they located, and what's happening inside of them? I'm very persuaded that we did build that train system, but we built it underground and in secret. And by the way, in that paper in the 1970s, they say in the paper, after the war, of course, there was the Operation Paperclip, in which we brought over strategic Nazi scientists from different fields, from different scientific domains. We brought them over to the United States, including guys like Wernher von Braun, who became instrumental in our rocket program over here. He was working on the Vril rockets over in for the Nazis. And we brought over various scientists and various military personnel who we thought could be useful for our endeavors here, our scientific endeavors in the United States. And among these scientists were members of the Todt organization. And we realized the utility of building underground facilities because we just bombed the hell out of the Germans. And we realized that warfare in the future is going to be aerial primarily. So we brought the members of the Todt organization over here, and we began to build deep underground military bases. But I believe, based on documentation, that we developed a particular kind of mining apparatus that was a nuclear, it was nuclear-powered mining machine that could bore out and liquefy rock as it moved through the rock. So it bores the rock out and it liquefies it. It creates like this vitrified tunnel, these vitrified chambers. And so we invented a technology that allowed us to go very deep and to build much faster than the Germans were able to do. And, you know, back in the 70s, the Rand Corporation published a paper describing what is called a magneto-leviton train, which
Magneto-leviton train.
Maglev train, a magneto-leviton train that could be installed either on the surface or underground, and that would operate in a vacuum tube. And it didn't run on a rail, rather it was using the electromagnetic force. And it was basically floating. It was a monorail, and it was floating, I think, like like 3/4 of an inch off of the rail because of the magnetic influence. And in the paper, they described how they could build this train, and if they put it in a vacuum, there's no resistance, there's no friction. They said that they could go coast to coast. I think it was half an hour or 40 minutes, coast to coast, from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles in like a half an hour with this magneto-leviton train. Well, I'm very persuaded that we did build that train system, but we built it underground and in secret. And in fact, I've talked to individuals in, let's say, highly placed individuals in the military who've confirmed that such a thing exists, and there is an underground railway, and it is this magneto-leviton system, and it connects the underground bases.
I got a question. Why would you have a podcast? You're out there. You got a great social media presence. You're here. Why would top military advisors or anybody leak that information to you?
Well, I mean, I don't think that. I think that it's common knowledge among people in the intelligence community and certain individuals working in different levels of the government. I don't think that it's that big of a secret that we have a train system like that. It would make sense for continuity of government, right? If we are preparing for a nuclear strike, that we would build underground bases and connect them with some kind of a rail system. So that part isn't, I don't think, that classified. I think what goes on in the underground bases is that's the classified stuff. I think that's where some of these unacknowledged special access programs are being developed in the deep underground military bases. But yeah, I interface with individuals all the time. I've interfaced with congressmen, people in the intelligence community, people in the military who, and of course it's all anecdotal. I've never seen the train system. I've never been in an underground base. But I've read the papers on the nuclear boring machine. I've read the papers on the Todt organization. I've read the papers from the Rand Corporation on the magneto-leviton train. And by the way, in that paper in the 1970s, they say in the paper that they now have the technology to build it. They had the technology in the 70s to build that train. So I think they did build it. They just didn't build it for the public. They took the technology underground. And now the Japanese and the Chinese are developing these kind of railways using the same kind of technology. Of course, they're not running in, as far as I know, they're not running in a vacuum tube. But they're using the same kind of technology and bullet trains and different kinds of rail systems that are being developed. So it's kind of common knowledge at this point. The secret would be how many of these deep underground military bases exist, where are they located, and what's happening inside of them. But I'm absolutely persuaded that they do, in fact, exist.
Interesting. We just, I can't even remember what we were talking about. Well, we were right before the interview started. We were talking about all the disclosure stuff, and you were having a meeting with the gentleman in Missouri, the congressman. His name escapes me.
Congressman Eric Burleson.
And I had mentioned you should check with Tim Burchett.
Yeah,
my friend.
I did briefly in the Capitol building.
Yeah, he's really into all this stuff.
Great guys, by the way. Congressman Eric Burleson, Congressman Tim Burchett, Anna Paulina Luna. These are phenomenal congressmen and women. And they are at the heart of the battle for disclosure in Washington, D.C.
Nothing's coming out. Nothing's coming out.
Well, it is kind of, they're frustrated.
We got guys coming up there saying they found non-human biologics. I don't even know what the hell that means, but...
We've had 2 hearings in Congress. The first hearing, of course, featured primarily the testimony of David Grush, who was in the intelligence community, and of course Grush, in an official capacity, investigating the topic of UAP. He came up against a program that he was not allowed to be read into, and this program is what's called today the legacy program. It's the program of the recovery and reverse engineering of non-human crashed UFOs, basically, and the non-human, quote unquote, biologicals associated with them. That was a term that Grush used during his testimony during the hearing. So we've had 2 hearings. The second hearing featured primarily the testimony of Lou Elizondo. And Elizondo and Grush are basically telling the same story. We have had this legacy program in place for decades. We've been recovering crashed non-human, let's call them non-human advanced aerospace vehicles. We've been recovering this and the biological creatures, dead or alive, associated with them. And this is an earth-shattering revelation for a lot of people. It's very difficult for a lot of people to assimilate that information into their brains, and because it's the biggest story in the history of mankind, right?
What do you think of all this?
Absolutely true.
You think it's all true?
100%.
Okay.
I'm because I'm somewhat of a ufologist, so I've studied ufology, and there's a lot of anecdotal data that has been accrued over the decades by competent ufologists that if you were to take the time to familiarize yourself with, I think you would, that everyone would draw the conclusion that, yeah, this is likely happening.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.
I don't know. A lot of these people that just seem to want us to go to war everywhere have no actual firsthand experience of what it looks like.
Man.
I couldn't believe how fast they shifted from the global war on terror to Ukraine.
Yeah.
Call me suspicious, but I remember thinking, like, they're just going to shut down all these contracts.
Do you think we should have been there in Afghanistan or Iraq?
I think we had. I think Iraq. No, I think there's so many. You look at Iraq now, and it's like, are we better off without Saddam? Like strategically, geopolitically. So you look at Saddam was basically a counterbalance to Iran, and we let them kind of go at it, right? Mm-hmm. And it was it would have kept Iran from gaining too much power. And now basically Iran controls Iraq. So how can that be seen as a success? Not to mention all the lives lost, and it was sold on completely untrue basis of WMDs. So I think that one's a clear no. And then Afghanistan, I mean, they did harbor Al Qaeda, and so I think that was justified. But I mean, pretty much the war was won by like 2003.
Yeah.
And then big army comes in, it gets turned into this giant forever war that I think was used to help people get promotions and to make a lot of money. And everyone just said they played their part. They said what they were supposed to say to the American people when it was clearly untrue to anyone who was there. And 20 years later, they pull out in shame, just this complete debacle. Still, makes me sick to think about. And then we immediately shift gears to, oh yeah, actually the Taliban wasn't so bad. It's these ISIS-K guys are the real threat.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, but we've been fighting these guys for 20 years.
Yeah.
And
now we're sending them $80 million a week.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll still be sending that by the time this interview airs, but because it's, in the House now, now it's on to the Senate to shut that shit down. But
it's unbelievable.
Do you trust our government at all?
No.
Any aspect of it?
No. I think all they do, I think something happens organically or inorganically, and they just look at it. How can we spin this to further our own interests? So 9/11 happens, and then we go into Afghanistan, we go into Iraq. I mean, you look at like all the money that was made, and it's just, I don't know. It's just hard to articulate the level of like rage that I have for these people that just lied to us for so long. I mean, we all have friends whose kids, grew up without a dad. And this was like 10 years into the war, 15 years in the war. Abbey Gate, 20 years later. It's like, why? Like, we all knew. Anyone who knew anything about that war knew that the strategy that they were employing was going nowhere. I mean, that was obvious to the youngest private. And then the 4-star general goes and briefs Congress and says everything's great. The ANA and the ANP, Afghan National Army, National Police, they're getting up to speed. They're going to be ready to go. They basically had the same talking points for 20 years.
Yeah.
You get that. There's a lot of careerism because, they're dressing up like Patton and all these generals, but really they're acting more like empty suits, saying whatever it is that kind of the powers that be want them to say. And then they get that combat command tour, go on, get promoted, and then eventually end up at Raytheon or on the board of some defense contractor. So you just look at it and you realize that there were a lot of interest in that entire war that had nothing to do with what they were telling the public.
It's crazy how many sellouts this country produces. It's just everybody up there is a fucking sellout.
It's like that 4-star pension isn't good enough. You need more.
Greed, man.
Yeah.
American greed.
It's sad to see. Hopefully
even looking back, there's so many things that you can kind of piece together. Like you were talking about southern Afghanistan. We were talking about southern Afghanistan and the big push down in Lash and Marja. And Marja was supposed to be the second biggest offensive force since Fallujah. And I remember when Obama came out with those ROEs, it was for the Marine infantry at least was because I was at the agency down there when that was all happening, and I remember when those ROEs came out, they were saying that if you get shot at and they drop their weapon, you're not allowed to engage.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like, why are you chopping our guys' legs out from under them? Like, you're not even giving
Why
them
even
an
send them
opportunity.
outside the wire?
That's what I'm saying. Second of all, like it makes it impossible for them to complete the mission, or you strip them of all confidence, because now they're all worried that their superior is going to send them to jail if they dime them out that a guy dropped what? What if he drops his weapon while you're shooting him? What?
Yeah. I remember, I think it was McChrystal who gave the speech. He's like, it's the bullet you don't fire that will win the war. And it was supposed to be some like, guru,
Yeah.
like strategy, some like, some strategy to a level that us normal people could never understand. I'm like, if that's the case, again, why send anyone outside the wire?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we're going to go do community engagement. It's like, okay, we're all dressed up like stormtroopers in a tribal
Yeah.
society, and we're going to turn them into like a Jeffersonian democracy. Like, this is the dumbest shit I've ever heard. And, I think they kept trying to build it up like, oh, they have a plan. There's just stay the course. They have a plan. And eventually, maybe I'm a slow learner, but after like a decade and a half, you're like, there is no plan.
Yep.
This is the plan. It's just to keep the contracts going and then keep getting promoted.
It's sad, man. It's our standing in the world is just, I feel like it's completely shot. I think other countries just lie. They don't want to challenge because of the repercussions, because we are so powerful, and the rest of the world hates us. I hate fucking saying this shit, but
Yeah, it's
I just feel
depressing
like we're
because
the bad
it's
guys.
yeah, like what good was done from that? Like, we're the people we're fighting over there again. Like, I think the vast majority of them had no concept of 9/11, and like a lot of them were like teenagers pulled from madrasas in Pakistan that were given, $5 and some opium and said, hey, go put on this suicide vest and
Yeah.
walk into, go find someone in uniform and blow it up. It's like, I don't know. A lot of these people that just seem to want us to go to war everywhere have no actual firsthand experience of what it looks like.
Man, that shit makes me so fucking angry. It does.
Yeah, and then I couldn't believe how fast they shifted from the global war on terror to Ukraine.
Yeah.
And I know, Putin invaded Ukraine, but I also remember when Putin invaded Crimea in 2014, and it was hardly a news cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And I call me suspicious, but I remember thinking like, they're just gonna shut down all these contracts. I remember thinking that like, there's so much money being made in Afghanistan. Are they just gonna get shut down now? Like, is that gonna be? Are we shifting gears into some new economy? Something else gonna happen? And then it was like clockwork. Then the Ukraine thing hit, and then of course this time, unlike 2014, now it's the biggest thing on the news, and it's something that we need to spend hundreds of billions of dollars for. And then you're like, oh yeah, those not to be a cynic, but all those contracts are just keep on rolling.
Ukraine could have been a simple real estate purchase. Those people didn't want to be a part of that anyways.
Yeah.
Russia wanted it. That could have been a very simple real estate transaction.
Seems like that's not what they wanted.
Yeah.
They wanted it to drag out.
Yeah. I wonder how long it will drag out. No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts. A semi-truck crashes through our concertina wire. He's got this dude's arm in his mouth, this Iraqi dude. And then next thing is just two bright white flashes, like boom, boom. These organs kind of pulled out and I could see the top of my hips. Pretty soon he goes, dude, you're not wearing any underwear. And I was like, you dude, it's cold, okay? But I think pretty much everybody thought I was gonna die, including me. So on the 5th, that morning, we go to S2 and get the brief. And the brief is like, hey, you need to be on the look for V-beds because they're going to attack you with a V-bed. And he said, all right. And I even made the joke, we get in the trucks. And I was like, well, let's go get fucking blown up, dude. Because everybody knew. We get there to this place called the Glass Factory, and it's just like what you would imagine. It's a factory. You've probably been there. And I haven't.
Okay. So it's just a kind of it looks like all the other factories over there, which are not all that different than ours, except for some architectural differences. But it has this wall around the sort of compound, and that wall has a big gate to let trucks in and then a man gate to let people in. And we were using the man gate to let the dudes through, the Iraqi dudes through, and then wand them and then send them in to go through the recruitment process, jumping jacks and all that fun stuff. I still got videos of that. And well, we get there that morning to the man gate, dude, and there is like 1,000 Iraqis lined up at the door already. And these are not a punctual people. So we called up and we're like, hey, this is a really bad idea. And they said, basically, Roger, continue mission, like, all right. So I went and talked, I was Bravo team leader at this time. And I went and talked to my first line leader. His name's Johnny. And I was like, John, I don't want to put guys out there. This is stupid. And so he and I decided we would go out with our interpreter. We called him Carlos because we thought he looked like he was from Juarez rather than Iraq. So we go out with Carlos and just start asking questions. And pretty soon this guy, and just the typical stuff like, why are you here on time? Why'd you get here early? The guys, they'd say, well, I just want a good opportunity at the job. Or a sheikh, cleric told me to be here. And that is usually a tip off. And so I'm in the middle of talking to this dude, and another guy comes up and he's like frantic and he's yelling, and I know like 13 words in Arabic or whatever, and none of them are like very kind. So I can't tell what he's saying, and I'm asking Carlos, man, help me out here. I have no idea. And he says he sees a bomb. And I said, okay, what kind of bomb? And he says, a bomb with wires. So my brain immediately went to tripwire. No, he said grenade. I'm sorry, grenade. That's what it was, grenade. That's how Carlos translated it to me anyway. And so I'm thinking tripwire. So I radio up. We had internal comms and then external. So I radioed our team and was like, hey, don't come out here. There's a tripwire somewhere. There's like 1,000 Iraqis wandering around. You can barely keep these people. So I said, don't come out here. We're going to try to figure this out. And then within what feels like moments, a semi-truck crashes through our concertina wire on the eastern perimeter. And then, of course, everybody lights it up. We've told the V-bed. Everyone's thinking that's a big-ass V-bed, So this guy gets taken out, and now there's Iraqis running all over the place. They think they're stuck between literally a rock wall and a gunfight. So they're going fucking ape shit. And we've got this truck, and
driver to deal with. And so now we actually need help. And not too long after that, Lieutenant Colonel McLaughlin shows up and a couple of dog handlers. So Lieutenant Colonel Mack comes out with his PSD team to start trying to help us get people organized. This is a fucking lieutenant colonel out there with a bunch of 5s and 6s and 4s, you know. He's a very, very brave man. And these dog handlers were Marines, and we'd done a few like joint stuff with those guys. And they said, hey, do you want us to go get our dog? And Sergeant Can's dog was sleeping on the hood of my truck. I was like, yeah, go get that sucker up, dude. So he comes out, and now we're getting these people back in lines. And we needed them in like 3 different lines. One, do you have a government ID? Do you have no government ID? Do you have a government ID, but you worked for the Ba'ath Party? Because we can't employ, you know, Bremer made it so we couldn't employ Ba'ath people. So we needed to kind of filter them through quickly once they went in. And right as we start to get everything pretty stabilized, I hear, and I'm on the radio actually with my medic, and I hear Bruno start growling. And I remember I just looked up under my K-pot, and he's got this dude's arm in his mouth, this Iraqi dude. And then next thing is just 2 bright white flashes, like boom, boom. And I wake up face down. I feel like I don't even know if I was fully conscious really. And face down, and I know I am really fucked up. And I can see organs and stuff right here, like kind of under me. But my arm, the only thing I could really move very well was my right elbow. And I got myself propped up on my right elbow and was looking, and I thought, holy shit, I got blown in half, you know. So my left humerus had been broken, but my left hand worked. So I was like rubbing this organ through my fingers, trying to see if I could feel it. And I don't know, dude, I felt anatomy. I don't know if you can even feel organs like that, right? But I'm sitting here. And then I hear Johnny screaming my name, just like everybody else, anybody with a McCoy or Mac, whatever, it's just Mac, right? And so I'm hearing Mac, Mac. And then next thing I know, I can feel like a little weight off of my back, and then a little more weight. And then these organs kind of pulled out, and I could see the top of my hips. Shit. So I was like, fuck, at least I got hips, right? But I couldn't really see much more. And then they rolled me over. And when they rolled me over, that's when I knew my legs were totally screwed. They were rolling like this, you know, wobbling. And what had happened is essentially everything that didn't have armor on it got hit by ball bearings. And my right femur was busted in 2 places, my left in 3, my left tibia, my left hip was broken in 2 spots, my right hip in 1, my radius and ulnar were broken, all the bones in my right hand, my right median nerve was transected right here at my wrist, my left humerus was broken, I had brain injury, busted ribs, broken back, and I was laying there bleeding. And, you know, the first thought you have is after seeing stuff, you think there's just absolutely no fucking way I'm going to live, you know? So then you start doing that stupid shit, like, you know, tell my mother I love her and that kind of stuff. And then my medic gets there and he starts cutting my pants off to try to assess, right? And pretty soon he goes, dude, you're not wearing any underwear, you know? And I was like, fuck you, dude, it's cold, okay? So we're trying to have as much fun as we can about it. But I think pretty much everybody thought I was going to die, including me. And every time, so your femurs, your glutes are so strong that when your femurs break that bad, they contract, they pull together. So my femurs are like as long as they were wide, which in the end might have saved my life really from bleeding out. But I could see every time my heart would beat, blood and kind of pus and stuff would come out of all these different holes. It was like if you had a water bottle and squeeze it rhythmically. Damn.
And so they were trying to get that stuff patched up, and I think they realized pretty quickly that they just had to get me on a medevac or I wasn't going to make it. And the medevac they had available was a 5-ton. So they threw me on a litter and then put me on this 5-ton. And some sergeant major, in his infinite wisdom, had put speed bumps on the road all the way from Ogden Gate to Charlie Med. So, those 5-tons, it's like riding on a brick already.
Yeah.
And then, so I'm just bouncing back there, rattling. I feel my bones inside. In my book, I think I described it as like a bag of wrenches,
Damn.
And they get me to Charlie Med, and that's where they established, started getting blood transfusions going in my arms. And then they put me on a bird to try to medevac me to Balad, which is where you want to go. You want to get to an Air Force base instead of an Army one, right? But we got in the air, and then I was bleeding out too much, so we had to stop in TQ to Quadam. You stop there to get more blood, and then again we had to stop in Fallujah. They had
Holy shit, man.
Yeah, and they had a trauma med center there, and so they started. That's where they put the PICC line in my neck, I think. So at one point I had like 8 quarts of blood going in, but I was developing compartment syndrome in my legs, so they were swelling internally, and they were doing everything they could to try to save my legs, So to Fallujah, they got me in traction splints, and I hadn't had any pain meds yet because my blood pressure was so low. They couldn't hit me with morphine, So they grabbed my legs and they gave me like a rag to bite on. And man, the pain was intense enough that I was in and out anyway, I think. But I bit down on that, and they got my leg on those traction splints and stretched them out. And then they took a knife and cut, obviously a surgical knife, not like a buck knife or something, but and they split me from knee to hip on both sides all the way up, and then put wound vacs in to try to peel that swelling and infection and that kind of shit out. And then I went from there to Balad, and then from Balad to Landstuhl, and then from Landstuhl to Walter Reed.
Holy shit, man.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.